What's up, Warriors, and welcome back to the Mental Health Movement podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris, and it has been quite a while since I recorded with you guys. It's been a really long couple weeks, long month off of recording and taking on guests and stuff. So, got a lot of exciting and powerful guests coming up on the pipeline. Today being one of those guests. But before we get to him, I just want to acknowledge that we are in National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and we are also in National Recovery Month. So, both of those two specific subjects I always want to make a point to recognize, because both of those subjects are really important and they go hand in hand with each other. It's recovery is all around in the mental health community. So um yeah, thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for reaching out when I was away. Greatly appreciate your support as always. So today's guest reached out to me maybe about a month or two ago, um, and I told him I'd reach back out to him in the beginning of September when I was coming back. And he has quite the story to tell. He's an advocate um, for Parkinson's disease, and he has quite the story to share with us. So please help me welcome George. George, how you doing, my friend?
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and welcome back also. But I want to thank you and your audience first for the opportunity to talk about this important topic that's actually not just affecting the U.S. but the world.
Yeah. I whenever you first reached out to me, I'm like, man, I started digging a little into your website, and just kind of like your about me and everything. I'm like, wow, your story alone, man, is just powerful. All the things that you do for this cause is inspiring, and doing all the things that you're doing outside of that, like your day job, and then doing all this at the same time, man, it's got to take a toll at you at some point. There's got to be like that maybe little break that you get, like kind of get to breathe fresh air. And wow, you do so much, man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we just don't have enough time to do even more. Even today, let's take like you were out. We have important events happening in the world, like the National Suicide Awareness, which I cover too, and my own issues. I had 4 back surgeries, so it's no matter what, kind of brush it off and realize that there's more important things still going on. And I don't really want, number one, I don't want anyone to ever feel alone like I did as a caregiver and my mother as someone battling Parkinson's. And number two, I want everyone out there to know they're never alone, but I don't want them to go through this. So I find that if we all work together, whether people who are aware or not aware, it's okay. Just now is the time to jump aboard the ship and kind of join together to fight for a cure and end this disease forever.
I completely agree, man. I remember the first time that I learned about Parkinson's disease. I think it was when Michael J. Fox was kind of like really open about it. We just started openly talking about it and researching it a bit, and just seeing that all the things that it does to, like you said, both the caregiver and the person that is suffering with that. So I want to jump into your journey here for a moment, and just tell us a little bit about your relationship with your mom, and just like how that whole journey affected you.
Yeah, I've always been a advocate. My background is law enforcement. I'm a reserve now, but police officer. I'm an attorney in Florida and Washington. My PhD is in criminal justice, but growing up from Brooklyn, New York, obviously it was around crime, unfortunately, and I always thought about how to help people who maybe couldn't have a voice or didn't know how to, excuse me, fight back. And I decided to dedicate my life to family members of homicide victims. So a lot of my research was on aiding African American mothers who lost their loved one due to murder in West Palm Beach, Florida. But again, it correlates around the world. So I've always kind of been an advocate. I fell into the world of Parkinson's because my mother had it for 15 years, and for 7 years, I knew the word Parkinson, but I didn't know it was a disease. She lived independently. She's always will be my best friend. So part of me passed when she did. Unfortunately, I try to do this today to, because I feel like she lost 15 years alive and 15 years after, because she was only 69. And in my weird world, you should live till 90 or something today.
Yeah.
And, so that's what, so I became her caregiver. But the last 4 years is when I started because we tried everything, and there's no cure today still for Parkinson's. There are methods if we had time to talk about to slow the progression, but we weren't aware of it. One of them is exercise, sports, and dieting and health food. But anyway, so one night she went on a trial for Parkinson's, and I got a call at 4 a.m. She was outside her home, rushed over there, and I found her moving her furniture out of her home at 4 a.m. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said she thought there were Nazis in her home that were going to harm her. And that's where I was introduced to the world of I think, late onset dementia, or it could have just been the Parkinson's medication, but hallucinations and delusions. And those are something that people don't even kind of associate with Parkinson's. The famous actor Ryan Reynolds just kind of came out in national news a week ago about his battle with his father, Parkinson's, and delusions and hallucinations. So that's when the night, like, I literally took over her life. She really needed it. I feel that I wouldn't be the man I am today or have the sacrifices if it wasn't for her sacrifices when I was a child. She was a school teacher, an incredibly kind person, and gave up her master's and her whole life to raise me and my brother. So I knew that that was the time to step up. And also today, as an advocate, obviously I can't bring her back, but it's incredible the people out there who are so inspiring. And if we only have time, I actually just released my second book just last week. Uh, and it's actually, we'll get into it later, but it's covering other people's journeys, because the first 2 years of my life, we started TogetherForSharon.com completely free. We're not a foundation. I don't accept a penny. I actually joke and say, don't send even $1 to me, because then I got to mail it back. Now I'm paying money. Like, we have links on the site that go directly to, like, Michael J. Fox and other organizations who are beautiful enough to create a link in my mother's memory. So if you do donate to my mother, it goes to these great organizations. But even the books I write, which we just started, that I don't accept money. I spent a hell of a lot to put them out there, which is kind
Yeah.
of tough to keep doing, but all the money has gone to those organizations. So I don't care about money. I just don't want people, like, to feel alone like we did.
Yeah, man, and one of the biggest things that I want to grab out of that statement is, not doing it for money. And I feel like in this community, just like the mental health community as a whole, there are so many people that are doing it for the likes, that are doing it for the monetization of, just, helping people, quote unquote. And I've had a couple friends ask me in the podcast, what's a long-term goal? Like, I'm assuming you want to make money off of this. I'm like, honestly, man, money's the last thing on my mind, because I've had so many conversations with so many different people from many different backgrounds that share their story, that share information that you wouldn't get off of, just some random person on the side of the street. And, with your situation, I feel the fact that you have a foundation and that you're not wanting to make money off of it. Well, yeah, not wanting to profit off of it, rather, and genuinely wanting to help other people with this disease, because it's so hard to find genuine people in this world anymore. And it's the unfortunate reality. I mean, there are many of us who are genuine, but there's even more people that are just kind of snake in the grass and come off as genuine until you get to know them. Um,
We're actually not a foundation on purpose, because I didn't want it. I mean, someday, I'm not going to say it wouldn't happen. I did want to try to gain scholarships for future neurologists who study for a cure for Parkinson, but I like being kind of my own person. It's just me and one son lost his best friend due to this disease. And the nice thing is, I'm really honest. I don't have anything to hide, and I'm blatantly honest, probably too much. And I don't have to kind of cower or bow down to others who, if again, for a quick minute, I don't have Parkinson's disease today, no longer a caregiver of someone living with it, but there's a third category, and there's like 20, 30, 40, 50 million people, I think, who lost a loved one due to Parkinson. But although I love the Parkinson's community, there are some organizations that don't really want to hear me. They don't really want me to say much, because we were told 15 times by medical doctors, you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. But that wasn't the case with my mother and many out there. And, we have a middle, beginning, and end of life, but no one ever wants to talk about the end of life because it's tough. But
yeah,
I'm the opposite. I think you have to hit every topic head on. For medical marijuana, this is licensed, the Death with Dignity Act. because we're never going to bring change if we don't talk about them. But we donated about $30,000 from our family to big organizations just to help support a cure. But even at the events, and I always say, please don't change because I don't really want to speak. But I'm at events, I have table, we're talking, and I never get asked to speak at the events, which is interesting. And a part of me, I think, is they don't want to, not that they don't want to hear about those who we've lost, but they concentrate, which no problem, mainly on people fighting today. But imagine if we brought back the 50 million or even more that lost a loved one into the fray and into the conversation. I think we would have so much more of a voice, but for some reason they don't do that. And I have a book coming on that too in the future, which probably will be controversial, but I'm not listing names, but I am calling out politicians and people who I've reached out for just 5 minutes at the time and kind of didn't seem to get it. There are those that did, it's funny our timing because a few weeks ago, the first bill in United States history passed. I was a part of it in the state of Florida. It's called the National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease, and it was exciting because, again, I can't bring my mom back, but it'll help so many more in the future. But it was bipartisan, which is impossible now today. So it was beautiful. But, I reach out to a lot of politicians just to get them on my show, which we started only on Parkinson's just for awareness. United States Senator Rick Scott was just a hero to me. He came on the show, like a U.S. Senator, also Democrat from New York. So he's a Republican. Here we have a Democrat, one of the leads on the bill from New York, Paul Tonko. Here's two individuals who really, I'm nobody to them, and I might be a constituent. They gave me at least 10, 20 minutes, came on my show. It was a beautiful moment. But I reached out to like several others. I mean, again, I don't like saying people, but Senator Marco Rubio in my own state, his staff, and it's not his fault, but his staff said they have, kind of more important things. So I said, my mother's life matters and my voice still counts,
Yeah.
and I'm calling them out. And if they hear this, which they might not, I don't mind because there's no politician that should be in any office, whether any party, that can't give a moment for the millions of people in the U.S. and the 10 million around the world battling this disease today. So it's kind of upsetting. But then again, there's 1% of that. 99.9 is just fabulous and beautiful. Like having the opportunity to meet Michael J. Fox was just changed my life. And also the book we just released, which again I'm not really plugging because I'm not here for that, but I don't know if you can see, it's called Voices of Resilience. It's on
Yeah.
the website. And to the beginning of my struggle and loss, even now, I thank you again and your audience because I'm still grieving, even though it's almost 5 years. September 28th would have been my mother's birthday. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I wish, Parkinson didn't exist and she was still with me. But my first book was called A Son's Journey. It's about my mother, my journey, and today's advocate. But so for 2 years, I thought about how important it is to keep my mother's memory alive. But then after 2 years, I was shocked to find out that not only is Parkinson's the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world, I do about 1 million people in the U.S. had it, but I was shocked to find out that 10 million globally had it. That's when I decided to kind of go on another mission and realized it's not just about me and my mother. And I interviewed 1,000 people around the world, from England to France to Spain, Italy, Africa, India, China. I mean, you name it. Parkinson's, unfortunately, doesn't discriminate. And just a week or two ago, we decided it's pretty thick, which I'm trying to split it into two instead of this. But we interviewed the first 200 interviews with people who have Parkinson's, advocates. I mean, even the Michael J. Fox Foundation's in there. I'm sharing their journey because they inspire me. You inspire me. Your audience inspires me to never give up. There are days, like you said, when we started, when you were talking, I'm like, maybe I should quit after this interview because it is, it's draining. I mean, I had a few back surgeries, and from the hospital, when I woke up, I grabbed my phone and started advocating for a cure for Parkinson's because it's means more to me. But there are days, like you said, I mean, it's just me. It's draining.
It
Kind
beats
of.
you up for sure.
So, and through caregiving, I went through all the symptoms and stress. And I didn't have Parkinson's, but I often call it, if I could coin the term, like secondary Parkinson's, where might not have had the symptoms, but I held my mother's hand through the worst. And,
Yeah.
so it's tough stuff. But I do want to say there's a lot of positive from the darkness, and we move forward. Yes, it is in a minute. I don't miss her. but every moment I breathe, and I even told my wife, which was kind of sad. I said on my gravestone, I want this. It's a tulip. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
It says PD. It's a tulip, but it's the world renowned symbol of Parkinson's. I sleep, breathe, and eat it, and I just don't want anyone again to have to go through this.
Yeah, man. And one of the most important things there is, if you don't talk about it, change isn't going to happen. And one of the hardest subjects of this community, just in general, is, the conversation of suicide. It's there are people that have illnesses that they can't recover from, just like Parkinson's and other diseases as well, that they can't recover from because there's no cure for it. And so many people are, ready to advocate for suicide and stuff, and not wanting to have the conversation about how many people are not here anymore. And it's
And
like,
one of the most famous, which you are well aware, is Mr. Robin Williams, and he
yeah.
had a form of, they believe, Parkinson, but more Lewy body dementia. And that's somebody I, grew up with, and
Mhm.
we all love him. So
And he had early stages of Parkinson's, I believe, right?
yeah, but it's always some way, somehow, someone around has to step in, and obviously the family. I'm sure I don't know them, but I actually reached out to them. I didn't get reply because it's hard. I'm just this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been honored to have. Now we're getting celebrities. We had a message from Jack Osborne. Ozzy's going through Parkinson's just
Yeah.
recently. One of Muhammad Ali's daughters just provided a message. Kenny G, who is my mother's favorite, played a song and made a message. They're all on the website free. Even Leah Thompson from Back to the Future. I'm trying to get Christopher Lloyd, which would be a fun one, but Michael J. Fox also is on there. So we need to all be a family. I don't care if you're a celebrity, a regular person like me. The only way we're going to reach more voices is as a family in this fight.
What do you feel like was the hardest part of accepting that your mother wasn't going to get better?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is the medical community. I don't think they lied, again, I don't blame them. They're trying their best, but we were never told she was going to die from the disease. So for 4 years, we sat there watching her kind of falling, like getting skinnier and skinnier. She went from, at 66, she was able to walk a few miles a week, to the last 4 years. She went to a cane for 2 years, 1 year a walker, then wheelchair and bedbound, all out of like boom. If you blink, and like we just don't get it. And I documented it all. I was hoping someday we turn the book into a documentary, but it's not easy again because it's expensive and I don't know the right people. So I always wonder, someone out there someday might see this and help me, but I wouldn't accept a penny too from it. I donate it. I don't want. I just think that we need more documentaries and movies really on Parkinson. But the hardest thing was really just seeing your loved one kind of diminish away and feeling helpless, not being able to do anything. Because as a lawyer and a cop, or even a professor, if I have a mission, like let's say Parkinson's, and I'll make a list and I'll check each thing off. And the one I can't check off is finding cure. And that's the heartbreaking, one even still today. And the only regret I have is that I wish we had the technology like we have now. And I wish I had a show with my mother, but not about Parkinson, just about my life, our life. That would have been something I just would have dreamed of. Like, well, I would have been so much incredible stuff, and she was funny and a character. And even today, she would have said, "George, don't waste your time with all this. Spend it with your family." But she knows she raised me to fight and to never give up. There are a lot of people I do feel that are discouraged when their loved one passes and feel, yeah, it's too late to move on. But I'm not like that. I want to fight for individuals. On my show, I interviewed a beautiful person who announced on the show she was wheelchair bound, which kind of is hard because it's like, what do you say about getting these journeys and other people's stories out there? Really, I feel changes the world. And even today, if we just reach just one person who might feel alone, then we've now changed the world for the better.
Yeah, man. I interviewed somebody who she had a massive stroke, and her entire what was it? Her entire right side of her body was completely paralyzed. And she's sitting there doing the interview from the bed. And I just told her, I'm like, there is not one thing in my life that I can possibly say that I can complain about, seeing
Right.
how much strength that somebody like her, somebody like yourself who has experienced what you've experienced, and anybody else in this community that is going through tough trials. the strength that comes from struggle is so powerful and so underestimated by so many. And my brother was taken away from me in 2021 from a drunk driver.
Sorry to hear that.
And when he passed away, I felt like I was done. I couldn't push on. I didn't want to push on. And instead of giving up, like yourself, him and I were very close, and he pushed me to never give up as well. And I created this podcast and have created that safe space for everybody to share their story, to share what they advocate for, to share their stories of their loved ones that they lost. And the fact that you can take your situation, and I also want to reiterate on this too. In my opinion, I don't think there's a timeline on how long one should grieve. I feel like we accept that they're gone, and we kind of grow with that grief. That hole is always going to be there, right? But we grow around that hole that's in our heart, and we become stronger and share that story and share their legacy. So essentially, our loved ones are sitting right next to us during this interview. Your mom's sitting right next to you, my brother's sitting right next to me, and it's just one of those things where it's important to always talk about your loved ones that are gone, but it's also important to keep continuing to live your life and live your purpose. And I'm grateful that you didn't give up, and I'm grateful that you're here sharing your story.
Thanks, and we send our love to you and your family too for your loss. Because I wish I could stop all these types of things and all these diseases. In the book too that I just released, I also cover other areas such as Alzheimer's, ALS, dementia, because I want to cure obviously for all of them. Parkinson's though hit us, the most. Also, just so everyone listening knows, Parkinson's disease is a neurological disorder. Some people have external tremors, like Mr. Michael J. Fox. My mother had more internal, which frustrated her a little eventually. Unfortunately, she got external, but I do always remind everyone what you don't see on the inside, doesn't mean that that person not struggling with anything, like you said, mental illness too. People judge people. I've had some beautiful young people on my show, men and women, who look perfect, like beautiful, but inside they have Parkinson's and they're not doing well. It just happened to be the right time. Other shows will have someone who you can't really understand their speech, so because of Parkinson, some of the stages is supposedly five, but the first three are where you can still live independently, but it's things like bradykinesia, rigidity, and tremor. So it's like stiffness. So if I want to move my hand to the screen, your body doesn't at times allow it, or you'll see somebody kind of moving uncontrollably. Also, things like difficulty moving, walking, and also doing daily activities are at the 1 through 3 stage. The problem is stage 4 and 5. That's where it's almost impossible to live independently, and you can actually now bring in world of falling and breaking things, and that's when you have to have more people surrounding your loved one. It's almost impossible to eat, bathe, dress, sleep, and walk. I mean, we went through all these with my mother, and the worst is again the last stage, which is the delusions, hallucinations, the constipation, which is another show, poor reasoning, loss of smell, weight loss, sleep disturbances, and vision. So just in a minute, that was, kind of some of what Parkinson's is, but there's just, so much more that I don't think people, again, are aware of. So that's why we do this, just so we're aware. And I'm actually published, my second book. The third one's almost done. It's going to be out, I hope, April 2025, because I don't really want to keep flooding this stuff, but and it's not easy to get out. I'm an independent publisher because there's not much care in the media or in publishing, or I just haven't met the right person for Parkinson's, which is a shame. But it's going to be on policing and Parkinson's. My dream is to change the world of policing in a positive way, but bring light to Parkinson's disease right now. And I don't want to get too much into it to take time, but as a person, teacher, former police academy instructor, they list dementia and Alzheimer's, but Parkinson doesn't exist. And my dream would be to have every department in the United States add the word Parkinson's disease, because as you just said, it's a movement disorder. Well, if someone's pulled over for a minor infraction late at night or even the daytime and they can't stop moving due to the medicines, the officers might think it's intoxicated or drugs, and it's not going to scene's not going to end well. So these things can be combated and kind of thrown out the window if we had a little bit more awareness for potential police and also for sworn. So that's my next big movement. I hope it maybe someday could go to Congress, but the problem again, which I actually even am hearing from bigger people than me, is just not enough care, and that's the saddest part.
Yeah, and the hardest part of any of these conversations is finding the biggest fish in the pond that
Yeah.
will actually show that they care. And I felt like for years that my voice didn't matter and that my story didn't matter no matter what I went through. And one of my biggest dreams or just goals in general is to speak, tell my story with NAMI, tell my story with the um, National Mental Health Alliance. And again, like you said, it's hard to find somebody who cares because there are so many of us that are struggling.
Mm.
And there are so many of us that have a story to tell. You kind of get lost in the shuffle there, especially when you're so heavy on advocating for what you're advocating for. So one thing I wanted to ask you is when your mother passed away, how did you go about coping after her loss? Like, can you tell our listeners like the proper steps to take when you're inevitably waiting for them to essentially pass away and you're just kind of waiting for that phone call or waiting for that day to happen. How do you cope with that loss?
Yeah, it always was shocking again because we were told she won't die from Parkinson, literally. There's no, so it was even weirder. Like the last 7 days of her life were something I couldn't even get into. It's almost like I wrote a book on it, and it's called The Sun's Journey. I think you could see it behind me, but this is it. And the reason I wasn't going to write a book, but I did it because I kept a journal the last year. So I do recommend to write your thoughts. And I never shared it until the book, and it literally is a time, date, and stamp of every day and time I spoke with my mother the last year, and you'll see the good, the bad, literal, the ugly of caregiving with someone with Parkinson's going through. Like I can read a quick sentence, but so one is July 20th, 2019. I woke up thinking that today might be relaxing. I was hoping for a mental break, which sounds perfect for this show because I couldn't handle the stress with so much I had to do for my mother daily and the time constraints. I love helping her, but I have reached my breaking point. 10 a.m., mom called, and then 5 times during the next hour. She complained she was being hurt by her aides and how horrible life is. I tried to be positive to her, but it was nearly impossible. How many more years can this continue? So that's like one teeny drip, but the problem is with the hallucination delusion, we had to hire aides because I could only be there so much, which I was there 24/7. But so these, here's an independent woman for 60 years, never lived with someone. We're bringing rotating shifts of strangers who really didn't know anything about Parkinson's. I kind of considered them more like babysitters, where I only had them there to make sure she didn't fall. But now she's in fear of these people, and also the hallucinate. All the medicines are not helping. So we had to remove the phone at one point because she called the police. And thankfully, I put in video cameras and saw she was not being harmed because I believed her. She was a very honest person, never lied. But I think the worst for me is seeing what the disease did because, she was in hospice for 1 year, which is also unheard of. Usually you're in it for a few days, but it's a long-term hospice, which was something new in Florida. So it really just tore my soul apart. Even some days it's hard to talk about it. Like I'm 6'2", 200 pounds in policing, and I'm fine now. But some days after these shows, I'll go to my wife and fall apart. I did pick the cover. I don't know if you can see of the book, which is one of my favorite moments in my life. It was the mother son dance at my wedding, and my mother and me. It was just a moment, 3 minutes that Parkinson didn't exist, didn't matter, and it'll never take that memory from us. She was smiling, laughing. She was beautifully dressed up, and it was just a beautiful time before the new family was coming. And I have 3 kids, and her favorite time was with her 3 grandchildren blowing bubbles in the backyard. So, there are the moments that you can never forget. You shouldn't. The only other thing is you're supposed, which I didn't do, you're supposed to take care of your own health first, which is I didn't do it then and I don't do it now because, like I said, if we miss that opportunity to reach one person, it will break my heart. And I always say the only journey today that does break my heart is the one that I'm not aware of. So one example is a week or two ago, I discovered a group called, I think it's Humanly Potential Power. It's a group of 4 or more, like a crew who row boats, and they rowed around the world raised like $40 million for Parkinson's disease. They're going to be coming on my show, but these are the gentlemen and the women, the men, the kid, everybody who just inspires me to never give up. I can't row a boat, I can't even ride a bicycle, but at least I can share their story and journey and make sure people know that they're not alone.
Yeah, and the hardest part of wanting to help so many other people, and you and I are so much alike in this regard, is we don't take care of ourselves 100%. Everybody's needs, everybody's things are put before ours. And I it's a double-edged sword. It's great that we're so selfless as human beings, and at the same time it's just kind of like you gotta look in the mirror and they're like, hey, maybe I'm not doing so great and I want to be 100%, but you also want to advocate for this cause. And for me, that came from growing up and watching two very selfish parents that just kind of neglected their kids. And when I became an adult and finally, started to realize what kind of people my parents were, I wanted to be the complete opposite of that. I wanted to put everybody else before myself. And I try to take care of myself the best that I can. And sometimes, some days, I do really good with that. Some days I don't. But I feel like there's got to be some balance in there that you and I got to figure out, man. It's so hard
I
to.
mean, look at now, we're sitting here on a Saturday. I have my own show at 2 o'clock. We're interviewing this amazing person who runs the Boca Raton, Florida Ballet, but they have a program for ballet for Parkinson. So we're
Oh,
gonna, and
wow.
my wife's on co-host for that show, and so we didn't have to do this hour, we didn't have to do that. I don't have to put out a book. I could just sit and rest for 1 minute, but I think
Yeah.
there's more, I'm full rest when we're not here anymore. I guess. So,
Right. So,
somebody, and I hope we don't have to have my kids continue this on, and I hope we have a cure. That's the end. I'll leave the website, move on, but still remember my mother. But it would be, that's why I got into the books. It's something that lives on beyond me. Just very difficult because it's very, very expensive. I mean, like I said, probably too honest, but I've spent over $40,000 on my first book. Probably made just 800 and donated it all back to this cause. And it's the problem is you can't fund the next one because you didn't so it's a struggle, but I still try hard to use our life savings to get these out there because it's very important to me. I have one I'm working on after the policing. I mean, I already have one book a year for the next 10 years. One, it's going to be, I don't want to give too much, but it's going to concentrate on people like me who lost a loved one due to Parkinson's, and in the book it's going to show the darker sides of social media because again, it's a lot of things. You'd be shocked. When I lost my mother, I looked for someone to support me. Went on Facebook groups, which was a mistake, and it might work for some people. But I had someone accuse me, my mother didn't die of Parkinson's. She didn't. She's alive. That I'm not true. It's like weird because I wasn't selling anything. And those are the normal person, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Would say, you know what, forget this. I'm not doing it, and I didn't do that. And now today, the website TogetherForSharon.com. I thought I'd have 4 or 5 people. We've had over 40,000 people visit. And I don't know if it's because of our advocacy or unfortunately is it that it's progressing around the world. Now you see national attention. Willie Geist from NBC talked about it. His father has it. Some of the biggest politicians' family members have Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox. Also, Ryan Reynolds' family came out recently. We lost Richard Lewis, the great comedian, only a few months ago due to Parkinson.
right.
There's incredible athletes now. I had the honor to speak to Bernie Kosar, the legend football player. He made a message for me recently. He has Parkinson's. So it's just really sad that it's growing so quickly. And again, there's no cure, but there are some methods and ways to take to reduce the opportunity to gain Parkinson's. Some of these things also, the pesticides, the bug sprays, or what I feel is strongly environment is what's causing it. My mother never had any medical issues. She really ate healthy, but had a home for 20 years, had mold and termites, and God, who knows what the sprays were in them. You can see the famous case, Camp Lejeune, where the military base and the water chemicals were poisoned to the families, the veterans, and now many of them have Parkinson's and other illnesses. Also, we're now, the 13th is actually a national day to awareness for Parkinson's and spearheaded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. I think it's next Tuesday. And a big push, which you'll see on my social media, is to ban something called paraquat, it's a poison in our chemicals that is used in pesticides. It's banned in every country except Australia and the United States, which is baffling. So
Wow.
everyone can go on my pages that day. I'm going to share a link from Michael J. Fox, and you can just it's a link to just not protest, but to kind of get your politicians aware that we need to ban it.
Right. Um, so let's talk about the Together for Sharon movement. When did you start it? Did you start it right as she passed away, or was it during you were caregiving, or when did you start that? And what was the inspiration behind the name?
And
Because
my
I know
mother,
it was your mom's name.
right, and I appreciate it and bring light to this important topic. My mother again was shockingly passed. Like we didn't
Mhm.
expect it. So I decided, because I'm the kind of person like to give a little something and remember. So we designed these little bands. I don't know if you can see it. It just says
Yeah.
Parkinson's disease awareness inside a memory of Sharon Ackerman. Now it has the website. We didn't have a website. So second I did that, I thought that would be it and move on. And, I'm heartbroken, but that's life. So somebody in the family member sent me a picture, and it sounds funny, but I'll go off screen, but it was just a hand on the band.
Yeah.
And they kind of hit me in my head. I'm like, this is 2020, whatever, 2020 then. I'm like, people, like to go viral and talk about things, but they don't want their faces in it. So I'm like, I started putting the band on. I would go to shopping center, the basketball court, Disney World, and I would show the band in my hand without my face, and it'd be like my mother's with me no matter what. Somehow it got out there and it went viral online, and we had to send I spent a lot, like a few thousand, and we just started mailing them for free around the world. Like people even in Spain were wearing them. And Willie Geist, again, I don't know him well, but his wife Christina wore it, and that was pretty cool. Then all of a sudden, even now, if you look on my webpage and click under, I think, partnerships and celebrity fighters, I call people with Parkinson's warriors, because I think that's what they're fighting with, the battle. They're strong, amazing people. But even Michael J. Fox is now wearing the band, which is pretty cool. But so the band started this movement. I had to stop that, obviously, because I couldn't afford it, which is why it probably should be a foundation, because people could buy it for $1 or $2, and
Right.
I can make them, but I don't really want to go there yet. And then, so that after that is when my wife and I decided, why don't we put a little website? We'll just have a few pictures and remember her, and that's it. But since that inception, it's kind of been like my coping mechanism. And, I get the word, even talking to you now, you learned about my mother, and it kind of helps her live on forever. And then from there, it kind of got on more and more. Now we have books on there, and it's like a little out of control, because I don't want people, I've had a funny story. I have 1,000 interviews are free on there. So one gentleman wrote me and said, I spent 10 hours on your website and I love it. And I told him, well, please don't spend 10 hours. Like, go. So, it's now made a life of its own, but it's a very important free resource. It has every link to other national organizations. It's everything in the world if you want to learn about Parkinson's in one spot, free. When I was going through this, they didn't have it. And if they did, I couldn't find it. I didn't know who to call. I didn't. And just shockingly, a week ago, I thought to myself, and like, my mother never met someone who had Parkinson's, and I never met someone who had Parkinson's. I never met a caregiver. Imagine if I had all these incredible people today doing FaceTime with my mother or calling. It would have just changed the world. She would have
Yeah.
known she wasn't alone. But you can't regret things. So that's why I did the website. And again, we poured like probably 40, 50,000 into it. I'll never get a penny back, which is not what we're here for. But I don't know how long that can honestly keep going. Thankfully, my people, the web team, have taught me how to do a lot of it. So now I took over, and they're saving me some money. But I love the books. I love doing it. My favorite thing is, again, the Voices of Resilience. It's probably going to be a several part series and have different interviews. But what I love is when you open it up, you might be able to see. But I did a color, which is expensive, but I wanted, because I don't think black and white shows the person. But even just flipping it open to pitch 300. Evan Henderson, he has Parkinson's and he runs marathons, and he's just
Wow.
a hero. And then you can read his story, his journey, how to reach him. He actually works with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So they're all, credible, important stories of advocates, of family members, people who lost a loved one. And it's just, it keeps me going.
So you mentioned Michael J. Fox being one of your heroes and arguably one of the most inspirational people in your life. What did it mean meeting Michael J. Fox for you? And did you develop any kind of working relationship with him, or how was that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. He's my hero because, like many, I mean, he could have just kind of led a private life and gone away, which he has every right to, but instead he decided to fight back, and he's raised over 2 billion, not million, but $2 billion for research. The downside is when I met him, it's like, when your life flashes by for good reasons. Well, this that happened, but at the same end, it also kind of made me heartbroken because I saw what the disease and the progression is doing. I don't know if you saw, but just recently, a few months ago, he was on stage with Coldplay doing beautiful, Johnny Be Good from the old days of Back to the Future. But now he's in a wheelchair. If you look 10 years ago, he was standing
Oh
playing
wow.
guitar. And when I was with him, he wasn't really able to do as much. And I don't usually comment because I don't know him personally, but this is from the first book. If you can see me in my
Yeah.
guitar. But and then I had the opportunity to meet him again. So I didn't have a lot of time, but I did plan for like months what I was going to say. I knew I only had it's going to flash by, and I said, how he's my hero. I told him I love him. I gave him the band. He's wearing it. I told him about my mother, and he appreciated it. And I had a little line at the end. I was going to ask, can I interview on my show? And I didn't do it because honestly, when I saw him, I felt kind of sad because I knew he was struggling, and I don't want to be kind of selfish. But if I ever do get a chance to meet him again, I probably will say that. I know he's speaking actually at a conference here in Orlando. Probably won't be able to make it. It's hard due to my own illness, or not ill, but medical issues. But and I don't think you can meet him at that time. He's also it's tough because it's not like he can really do as much with the people as he wants. He's like the nicest kind of guy. Like I bet if you're at an event, he'd run over, hug you, and all that. But now, because of the disease, it's even hard to go up and down steps. So I'll never forget that moment. It was a once in a lifetime thing. Usually I wouldn't have went because I work a lot. My wife and I looked at each other. I'm like, we don't know how much opportunity like that I'll get, and we just so it was actually at a Comic-Con type thing. I love that stuff. I don't really go to it or participate. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I've seen it 10 times also, but so I use that opportunity. No offense to my favorite comic book fans out there. I used it though more for Parkinson's awareness. And if you go on my social media, you'll actually see after I met him, I kind of cried in the bathroom because I saw a little of my mother in him, and it broke my heart because I don't want him to be struggling. So I keep fighting for him to.
And what a special moment it is to meet your heroes, because I feel like everybody should have the opportunity to meet their heroes in some fashion. And I've met my heroes too, and just kind of told them the impact they had on my life. And I'm so glad you got that moment with him. And it would be really cool to get him, get an interview from him. And obviously, like you said, he's struggling a lot more than he used to. And unfortunately, Parkinson's takes no prisoners, and it's just kind of one of those things that you yourself know how bad it can get. And I'm really glad that you got that moment with him, because doing what you're doing, I feel like, is so special as it is. But being able to talk to your hero and tell them what you're doing your part is incredible.
No, I appreciate it. The funny thing is, if you go to the web Together for Sharon or see the book, you'll see the photo of me and him. And I didn't even know at that point because I was in shock that he was wearing the band. I don't mind breaking rules, but they said do not touch, don't talk, don't do. I'm like, this is my moment. I'm not listening. So I gave him the band anyway, which he probably weren't allowed. I thought that would be it. He'd give it to someone, and that would be it. But the only reason I found out is it was more of an event where people could meet, and they weren't allowed to like do much. But so throughout the entire day, people were posting on like X now it's called. Every week it's something else, pictures with him, but they were more like in Back to the Future holding guitar. But I didn't know, and someone wrote me and like, did you see Mr. Fox? I'm like, what are you talking about? And if you looked at his arm, he was wearing my mother's band throughout thousands of photos the whole day. And that was like the coolest thing. I
I
mean,
love it.
I didn't even notice it because I was in shock. So I framed that picture in my wall at home, and it's in the book and it's on the website. But I don't think I'll ever be able to, even in no offense to other people I meet, but that's like the one moment. And if I had it over again, I probably wouldn't ask the second part. But I do wish. It's hard, I've been honored that their foundation has come on my show, which is enough for me. And they actually have my mother's book on their website, which is I never dreamt my mother would make the Michael J. Fox, Foundation website. So just incredible. Some things that are coming from all this.
Yeah, man, you're making beautiful strides, and I'm really happy that they were able to to do that for your book and for your mother and for everything that you're doing. Um, so that kind of brings me to the question of, your advocacy and everything for your listeners, for your audience. What is your main takeaway from, when you do conferences or interviews? Like, what is your main goal and your advocacy?
Yeah, my main goal is number one, you're not alone, but number two, there are so many incredible people out there that you're just not aware of. And that's what I like literally my life mission now is, in memory of my mother, but not as much. It's more about sharing other journeys. I started the Together for Sharon podcast. We have two. We have the Together for Sharon show. It's my wife and I, which is fun because you get the female perspective of caregiving because she was my mother's best friend too. And then I have Q&A with Sharon's son George, where I up close personal interviews with people around the world, from United States senators to celebrities to regular people who, no offense to those celebrities, are my favorite. I love just talking to, like you. It's like down to earth. We don't have to have a script. I don't write scripts. I just think it's more fun to have a conversation. And just today again, we're having Cindy, who's from Boca Ballet, and I can't wait because it's like, can you imagine there's people out there who love ballet and dance and don't realize if you do it, you can live longer and slow the progression of Parkinson's disease? Well, I didn't know that. So
Wow.
we're going to be talking about that today. And those are the things that excite me, like again, Saturday, Sunday. I have a show tomorrow. The first one we're starting. It's going to be fun. It's with a person who has Parkinson's, a guy who's become a friend of mine around the same age, but it's it's actually going to be called PD Sports All Star Cast. It's basically a completely show dedicated to sports and Parkinson. So we're going to cover a new sport each show. So we might start the first one basketball. I'm going to wear a jersey. But we're going to talk about how through sports you can slow the progression of Parkinson. So these are the things that, Sunday I'm tired and worn out. I have to work still, but getting the opportunity to work with other people with Parkinson's, advocates and people, and putting it out there in the world. You don't know if you'll get it one like or 100. I don't really care about that. I do wish people would share your show today and this, and we'll be sharing it around the world because I think it's a message that cannot really end when the lights and cameras go off. It has to continue, has to be shared. And I also hope everyone supports your incredible and inspiring work because you're doing some amazing things. But like I said, I do feel we're a family in this fight, but my mission is also to kind of discover other people. It's almost like Columbus sailing the seas and finding land. I want to find the most beautiful stories because that's what drives me. I do have one little statement. I don't know if you want me to say it now or wait. My last.
So we got one more question for you.
Please.
Well, one and a half. But so the first question I had was, you kind of alluded to you being a police officer earlier, and talking about the struggles of a driver that may have been medicated for Parkinson's and everything. So as a police officer, do you ever deal with mental illness? And what kind of courses does the police force offer for handling those kind of situations?
Yeah, every county and city is different, so I definitely recommend to reach out to your local organization, police. I do think that the biggest person, which I don't think there's enough attention, is the victim's advocate. Every county usually has, but guess what? There's like two or three. Not their fault. But I find this is a whole new show, but in our country, it's sad that there's really more emphasis on, and I don't blame it, but criminal and defendant rights than there is on the victim. A lot of time the families are completely forgotten. It's just how it is. So we need to change that. Bring awareness to all people, despite race, gender, everything. Everyone needs an opportunity to be heard, and things like that. But unfortunately, I'm reserved, so it's different. There's another show, but I've been an officer. It's called Reserve Officer since 2006. I'm kind of getting out of it due to back problems. I can't really put the stuff on anymore. But I've been an officer since 2006, completely free. So some people think it's crazy. My mother hated it. So I put a vest and gun on, completely free, go out there and hope to come home at night. Why? Because I really wanted to help the community and and I'm very ethical in values and just wanted, if I could even reach just like Parkinson's, if we could just help one person, I feel like I helped a little. And my favorite time was, Thanksgiving, helping families who are less fortunate, driving the children with Santa Claus. Those are the memories that are the most. But I have been at calls, with people who committed suicide, tragic things, mental illness, kidnapping, all the things, and it's not easy. It's funny because before you go to the academy, you watch the show Cops, and you're all excited. And then when you start the academy, when you're out, you don't really talk about it at all. Like I don't really ever talk about it. So my career is kind of winding down, but I do live through the students as a professor. I love teaching. My PhD is on criminal justice, and a lot of my background and interest has been with serial killing and things like that, and how to prevent it. Criminology, I just find it fascinating how environment, again, just like Parkinson, is could be a unfortunate potential cause of crime. And I'm anti-violence. Like if you talk about anything, I hate it. Like I don't hate much. I hate Parkinson's. I hate violence. I think that you sit down, whether it's politics or anything, with someone, just breathe and be positive. You could really, I bet you'd be best friends with both sides of everything. It's like incredible. But we don't have that sometimes, and again, I'm not the biggest proponent of the media. Obviously, we need a media, but I always joke and say, if you take, I can't get our local media to cover Parkinson's Awareness Month. I read 15 letters, not going to give up. But how could they have, half hour? Here you go, ready? Half hour of the news. I'd say about 15% is about violence and crime. Maybe a second or two, or 3 minutes sports. Then you got 10 minutes of commercials. That's the end of the show. So
Yeah.
it's really shouldn't. That's the problem, And again, that's a different topic. But the media, I love them, but we need them to be, covering the positive. Forget these negative stuff, and it's just tough world. And through COVID, my mother passed right before, which would have been a nightmare on top of Parkinson. Then it would have. So I think we have some incredible things in our country, even more amazing people. But I think that we need to get our politicians, our media involved more, and to shed more light on the positives and not always the negatives, which is also heartbreaking.
Yeah. So at the end of every podcast, I usually like to read a quote that I found based on the subject or any of the guests that I have. I'll let you go ahead and read your statement before, and then I'll
I
read.
Thanks. Yeah, this is to you, your audience, and everyone listening. We love you. We support you. We care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with your amazing host here, will advocate for you, and I feel together our voices are so much stronger. And on the last note, I always say I'm just getting started. It's kind of funny because I haven't, but I say that because every time I meet an incredible person like you or your audience or those gentlemen sailing the seven seas, which I get seasick and I can't even go down the block with a boat, but they motivate me, inspire me, and I just want the world to know about your work and their work. And I just feel together we really will make an impact. But if we all decide not to talk, not to do these shows, and not to spread the awareness, we're just going to go into like kind of a hole and never be seen. So I'm just again grateful for the opportunity, your time, friendship, and I hope that we do have opportunity for more conversations in the future.
Yeah, man. Thank you again for coming on. Before I read my quote, where can our listeners find you on social media?
I appreciate it. If you go to TogetherForSharon.com, it's all spelled out together, FORSHARON.com. Now it's cool if you just type that in, it'll come up. I'm kind of shocked sometimes because I've done 1,000 interviews, so they all show up on the internet. But if you go to the website, you go a little down. I always say it looks like a Christmas tree, but it's a tree. And right there, you can get to every single one of my social medias. Again, it's all just me. It's not like I'm the guy behind the scenes. Some people joke and think we're like a big $1 million company or something. But no, it's just me. There's nothing like that. But I hope with you and everyone else's voice, we can kind of team together and send a message to everybody around the world that we're not going to stop until there's a cure for Parkinson's disease.
Absolutely, man. And thank you again for sharing that with us. And the statement was beautifully written. So I'm going to read my quote to you guys. This was from Michael J. Fox, and it reads, believe that life is a gift. Recognize that truth and be humbled by it. Appreciate that you are part of something great and timeless. One of the best quotes I've ever read from a celebrity because, I feel like as humans, we take life for granted, you know, and it's really hard to accept reality for what it is sometimes. And it's really hard to be grateful at times as well because you're going through the weeds, you're going through the mud and just wanting it to end. And, all we can do is our best and take everything a day at a time. So, George, thank you so much again for coming on. Appreciate you telling your story. And this podcast will drop on this coming Tuesday. For my listeners, thank you guys so much for your support as always. Until next time, be well. And as always, be gentle with yourselves. Take care, guys.